Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to the Institute for Personal Development, Kriya Yoga Ashram, where total consciousness is the new frontier.
Kriya Yoga is union of the individual with the divine. Join us as we explore the practices to initiate this process.
Good morning. Welcome to the Voice of Yoga. Let's Talk Consciousness. I am your hostess, Lisa Winton, and with me is Kenny Toy, also known as Swami Jayananda, founder of the Institute for Personal Development, located here in Hampton, New Hampshire. Good morning, Swami. Thank you for being here today. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing pretty good today. How about you?
I'm doing pretty good today, too. Thanks for asking. And we want to thank you all for tuning in. So today on The Voice of Yoga, we have dedicated 12 shows to discussing the 12 signs of the Zodiac as a map leading to spiritual understanding. Each week focuses on the respective sign as an archetype used in the process of an individual becoming divine. Listen this week as we explain the function of Aquarius to know the truth that awakens us from the cycle of death and rebirth. These shows will explore why divine law cannot function in your experience if you are not conscious of its presence. Welcome to the Voice of Yoga. We are talking consciousness. Join the Kriya Yoga Spiritual Advance to get the light in your soul and become free from the law of karma. So, Swami, I'd like to start the show off because we may have some new listeners out there who may not understand why we've decided to do this 12-part series, 12 Signs of Spiritual Truth. Can you let us know why this should be important to us?
Well, we're trying to map out the process to have some sort of tangible evidence, some kind of a map or a schematic that you can plot your unfolding, your revelation, where you're moving from material to mental and then eventually to spiritual identity.
Mm-hmm. And we said in the summary that this week we're going to focus on Aquarius. And we also said that the function of Aquarius to know the truth that awakens us from the cycle of death and rebirth. Can we dig a little deeper into that?
Yeah, we start out, Aquarius is fixed air. And it's the last of the fixed signs, and it's the last of the air signs. The key phrase is, I know. I can only think of that statement, know the truth, and it will make you free. And it's going to make us free from this law of karma, which is the cycle of death and rebirth.
So I may not be the only one that's having trouble making the connection from Aquarius to knowing the truth and the cycle of death and rebirth. How do we make the connections to those?
Well, we can only demonstrate whatever it is that we know, whatever it is that we understand. Beyond our level of consciousness, beyond our degree of awareness, is not something that we will be able to demonstrate. And as we have been saying in the shows, there are 3 modes of mortal thought that really keep us bound and trapped in the cycle of death and rebirth, which are under the government of the law of karma. And so what we are really trying to do here is we want to know this truth, the truth that there is only one divine life in this universe, the truth that this is a spiritual universe. And what appears in our senses is not the creation of the divine, but it's really the product of the world mind, which is the shadow of divine mind. And divine mind is the truth of our being, that what Spirit created is whole, complete, perfect, and it is eternal life. Now, what the world mind imitates is not real. And so we're trying to come out of the hypnotism that comes from the belief in these 2 powers, this belief in a life that ends in a grave, and a belief in mortality and a belief in physical form, period.
Now, we're also talking about a belief in karma itself.
Well, karma is the law of a belief that comes with a belief in matter. It comes from the invisible source of karma is really the world mind, which is really a concept of the truth of our being, which is divine mind.
I remember when I first heard the word karma, this is years ago when I was a young adult, doing my own individual research. Other people may be under the same impression as well, and that is that I always thought that I'm going to keep coming back into these lifetimes as a human until I have paid my karmic debt, so to speak. And so some lifetimes may be what we would say good experiences, and some karmic lifetimes may be not so good as we're paying back all these karmic debts, good, bad, or otherwise. I think what we're trying to say is maybe that in order for us to break this karmic cycle, this return to a mortal existence, we have to understand and know the truth. Would that be right?
Yeah, because what we're really trying to do is we don't want to just remain in the cycle of death and rebirth and be able to accumulate good karma. Because at the very best you will do is change finite bad to finite good. And finite good is going to eventually turn into finite bad. And that's the ongoing cycle that we're in. But what we're really looking for here is liberation from it. We want to be free from this cycle of death and rebirth. We want to find the truth of our being. And what that basically means is that we want to come out of the changing conditions of our own personal mentality. And we want to start to live out from the changeless state of being, the perfection of being.
And I have also heard that these spiritual beings make this conscious choice to keep coming back until all beings have ascended to this level of consciousness. So therefore, are they making their own karmic return as well?
Well, I think you're talking about what's called the Bodhisattva,
right?
Which is the one who consciously has achieved that state of enlightenment and is liberated from the cycle of death and rebirth, but chooses to come back on a very conscious level to help elevate the collective consciousness, to help liberate this world mind from the hypnotism that it is stuck in. And yeah, you're right. This is something that can actually be a conscious choice, that someone who has achieved that level recognizes that if there's only one life in this universe, then true enlightenment doesn't happen until every sentient being crosses that threshold.
So again, we come back to what really has to happen. What we said in the summary is we have to know the truth, and that's with the capital T. And would you mind going over again what that actually is?
Well, the truth is just what I had said, that there is only one divine life. And that life is perfect, whole, complete. Anything that does not reflect divine qualities isn't real. Means that it does not have principle behind it. It's not self-existent. It is just a concept or an image in thought.
Now, how do we know when we are exuding that understanding? Because it's not about conduct like we've discussed in previous shows. So how do we really know that we're operating from that level?
Yeah, you want to use the fruits of your experiences. You want to look into the testimony of your senses and make sure that it is completely reflecting divine qualities, things like perfect health, financial stability, anything that would reflect discord or lack or limitation, because you really want to understand that if you are to reflect the divine, if you are going to be individualized from divine mind, then you must have divine qualities. You must have a relatively perfect life.
And we're not talking about conduct. We're not talking about feeding the poor, giving charitable organizations. We're not talking about that necessarily.
No. What we're really talking about, see, the message of the Christ is really to heal the sick, reform the sinner, raise the dead. And that's a much different command than to try and improve the human experience for individuals or groups.
Mm-hmm. So is that what we talk about when we say to be Christed?
The Christ is the saving aspect of truth. Christ is what makes divine mind intelligible to the human mind. To be able to distinguish between the imitation world mind from the original divine mind. Because the world mind really is the shadow of divine mind. It reflects it, but it's not it.
And so I think that's what we have to be really conscious of is where are we, which mind are we operating from?
Right. And for most of us, the term thinking really is limited to the testimony of our five senses. That we're really limited to what is registering in our human consciousness. And so a big part of what we're trying to learn here with Kriya Yoga is how the causal spiritual body will actually lift us out of that limited perspective. It will move us out of what is dualistic, what is really apart from the truth of our being.
So I've heard you say before the phrase like attracts like, and so what you just said kind of reminds me of that. I wonder if we can dig a little deeper into that.
Yeah, that's what we have been saying in a lot of these shows, that whatever it is that we are attracted to, whatever it is that we desire, is really going to determine our level of consciousness. And a big part of what we're talking about here in Aquarius is the purification of consciousness of all erroneous concepts, thoughts, and ideas. And the reasoning for this is that the emptying of the mind to make it an avenue of awareness for the presence of divine mind. See, spirit doesn't think in terms of duality. There is no contrast. There is no opposition in spirit. Spirit is absolute, and it's absolute silence. And therefore, silence begets silence. So a lot of the exercises that we do where we're trying to empty the mind to maintain this level of silence, which actually will attract divine mind into our consciousness.
Well, I've heard people say things like, I was in meditation and God spoke to me and this is what he told me to do, or I felt like I was guided to do this. So I'm not sure if that's what you mean by silence. It doesn't sound like it to me, but I could be mistaken.
Right. I've heard a lot of that. And there are a lot of people who speak about visions and a lot of this paranormal stuff that they talk about, but that's really not what we're looking for here. The language of spirit is silence. Spirit does not speak English. It doesn't talk in words. And so when you are communicating with the divine, you've got to be really careful that you are actually communicating with the one true divine mind as opposed to the imitation, which is the world mind. Because the world mind is really invisible but tangible. But divine mind is really invisible and intangible. There is no vibration, there's no frequency with spirit.
Well, I think this is a good place to pause to hear a word from our sponsors. So listeners, will be back with you in just a few moments. Kriya Yoga Theory 1, Human Development and the 8 Essential Stages of Kriya Yoga. This program is a comprehensive course that will help you get your arms around the science of Kriya Yoga. It provides a clear understanding of the goals and objectives behind yoga, along with the physics of spirituality. It includes the practices, supportive concepts of Kriya Yoga, and the process in human development, apotheosis, the process of the human becoming divine. A complete guide on how to become a human in the adult state. Get the light in your soul and experience the simplicity and joy of union with the divine. This course is available in live classes at the ashram or online with 8 videos or 4 CDs. Visit our website, www.ipdtransform.com, for more information. Welcome back. For those of you just joining us, you're listening to The Voice of Yoga, and we are talking consciousness. So, Swami, I have a question for you, and that is, check me here. I think that if we are truly connected to what you're calling this true silence, that we should be getting everything that we need, whether it's food, water, any type of supply, and we should be getting this without the need for prayer and pleading.
Yeah, because isn't that what it tells us in the Bible? Ask in my name. And what it translates into is to ask in my likeness. So when we assume spiritual identity, we open the channels to the divine law of life, which is fulfillment. It's absolute love. It's absolute life. And when you are under the government of divine mind, then you should not want for anything. You cannot lack. And it's a very interesting dynamic, because when you assume spiritual identity, then with it comes fulfillment. And so there shouldn't be anything that needs to be changed, added to, taken away, or overcome. Which is, I think, very different than what a lot of us think prayer is. Because for a lot of us, prayer is asking for things. When you are in communion with the divine and not thinking that you are in communion with divine or thinking that you are spiritual, but when your mind has been Christed, and you now communicate with the divine mind, then it is not possible for you to lack anything.
And I think at that point, we don't even need to plead in prayer, ask for things, because at that moment, at that level, we would be operating from thy will and not my will, our will.
Right. That really is when you are attuned to the perfect law of spirit, that is dominion.
Well, we have a great question here in our notes that I want to ask you. And it is, why is the message of the Christ to heal the sick, reform the sinner, and raise the dead? Yeah,
because spirit is activity. the ever-presence of eternal life, and it necessitates demonstration. And like we had said earlier, the language of spirit is silence. So it really operates in deeds, not words. And the other thing is that spirit can only function in itself. And this is the truth which will dispel all error that we need to know to make us free.
Well, I think this is a good time in our program to talk about Alice Bailey and her works, The Labors of Hercules. So what can you tell us about Aquarius and the Labor of Hercules, and what do we learn from it?
Yeah, the labor that she assigns to Aquarius is cleansing of the Augean stables. And that's what we were talking about, is the purification of consciousness, the purging of all the erroneous concepts, thoughts, and ideas, and really moving beyond what we call in yoga pratyahara, sense withdrawal, and really moving into our soul sense or spiritual senses, because we're now not working with the image and likeness, but we're back to the original. That our mind now is an avenue of awareness for divine mind. And the intention here is to literally become individualized from divine mind and let divine mind take over the scientific government of your being.
Now, that could be a tall order for some people, whereas we're taught to have this, control our emotions, control our words and actions and deeds and so on and so forth. So is it this giving up of control?
Well, it's not kind of what I think a lot of us equate giving up control means, to just do whatever it is that willy-nilly kind of a thing. What this really is a surrender of personal desire, a surrender of personal ambition, goals and objective wants. Even the concept of needs is given up because you are assuming an impersonal sense of spiritual identity. That now you are giving up your personal will, that little limited sense of who you are. And you are now identifying with a spiritual sense of selfhood, which is now under the government of divine law. And you no longer have this belief in two powers. There's no longer anything that you need to defend or protect, because when your identity finally aligns itself with the one divine life, there is no competition, there is no conflict, there are no enemies.
I like that word surrender as opposed to giving up, either giving up total control or something along those lines. And as you were speaking, it reminded me of the picture of Daniel in the lion's den when he's facing out the window and the lions are behind him. He's in this particular, I'm going to say, a Christed state. And I think that's a really good depiction of surrender.
Right. And it's not just throwing up your hands. And I think what it reminds me of, kind of like Daniel in the lion's den, the surrender is that he is completely under the protection of divine law. As opposed to, say, for example, when we saw the movie Gandhi, and the people were marching up and getting clubbed by the soldiers. And I thought, that's a very different surrender than when one is doing it under the government of spiritual identity as opposed to a human being doing something to get something.
All right. Well, I want to ask you to review with us Alice Bailey's take on the constellations of Aquarius.
Yeah, the first constellation is the Southern Fish, which is also called Pisces Australis. And the second one is Pegasus, the winged horse, the ever-inspiring higher mind, and Cygnus, the swan, is the third one, a symbol for eternity flying in time and space.
That's an interesting phrase, eternity flying in time and space, because I think that is something that we as humans do a lot, is that we're so fixated on time.
Right. And a lot of that is because it's part of the testimony of our senses, that we are looking at an approximation of the truth of our being. And so it is, again, under the law of karma.
And then the second one you talked about, Pegasus, the winged horse, the ever-inspiring higher mind. I wonder if that is why, as children, I myself being one of them, was very fixated with the idea of Pegasus, a winged horse. And I wonder if that was coming from not just my subconscious mind, but my higher mind, like maybe even knowing and realizing that there was some kind of symbology there with Pegasus.
Yeah, I think we're all inspired a lot of times by these mythological images that really try and help us get out of this cycle of death and rebirth, something that will help us break the hypnotism and breaking out from this false sense of identity. And so a lot of times using these imaginary images can be helpful because it helps us move beyond what we think is real. And it's quite a shock for a lot of us when we find out that the testimony of our senses is really the lie.
Interesting. And is there anything that we should learn about the southern fish, what you said was Pisces Australis?
Well, I think it's kind of the lead into Pisces, which is going to be the last of the signs. It's going to be the fulfillment of the circle that we will discuss next week.
All right, one last question for you. What does it look like to know yourself spiritually?
Yeah. To be whole, complete, fulfilled is really beyond the rational and the finite, beyond the senses, and you're now in the absolute. Now, what's interesting about that is the experience of that is really nothing. It's the void. It's the sleep from which we return where we have no recollection because it doesn't register in the human mind. It doesn't register in the five senses. And the dissolving force of the universe is spirit, and it's translating everything back into itself, back into the one divine power.
Well, I think this is a good place to end our program for today. So listeners, be sure to access the websites www.ipdtransform.com. There are a lot of tools on the website that you can further your spiritual development. For example, under online classes, you can access Swami's free webinars. That's on Wednesdays at noon. And on the home page, 3/4 of the way down, you'll see a list of some of the Blog Talk Radio shows listed under Swami Says recent posts. So with that, Swami, do you have any other final thoughts or comments about today's program?
Well, I would like to encourage everybody to know the truth that will make them free. And with that, I'll wish everybody a good day. Namaste.
Thank you for listening to our program, The Voice of Yoga. This is Lisa Winton. Along with Swami Jayananda, we will be signing off. Have a wonderful Kriya Yoga kind of day. Namaste.